This is a disappointing Switch game, but what does it mean to be a disappointment? Glad you asked. Dictionary.com defines disappointment as sadness or displeasure that results from the non-fulfillment of one's hopes or expectations. It's like when you have just enough cash to get a snack from the vending machine, but then it gets stuck on the way out. It's like when your parents thought you were gonna be a lawyer or a doctor, but now here you are making videos about children's video games. It's like when everyone thought you were gonna be the next Wii Sports, but really, you were just a terrible tech demo called 1-2-Switch. The Nintendo Switch boasts one of the greatest libraries in gaming history, but today we're talking about those stuck bags of chips. Those games that didn't quite live up to our expectations, and the launch title 1-2-Switch is the perfect place to start. The way this game was marketed, it looked like it was going to be the next Wii Sports, and on paper, it should have been that. Cool minigame compilation showcasing the new Nintendo console's technical capabilities, sign me up. But then it came out, and everybody realized that it wasn't really the next Wii Sports. There were several problems with this game, like the fact that there's no real way to have a solo experience. You can't even get into the game without setting up a second Joy-Con for multiplayer. That means you have to make friends to play this game. That's a problem for some people. Let's just say you actually have friends to play with. Well, the minigames themselves are only fun for a grand total of about 7 minutes. Some of the notable games are Quick Draw, Samurai Training, and Joy-Con ball fondling. On the surface, these may sound interesting, but they get old really fast. And there's no progression system that allows you to advance through the game or keep track of how many minigames somebody has won. It's just a big old minigame compilation that runs its course pretty quickly. And for reasons that are still unclear to me to this day, Nintendo decided to make a sequel to this game titled Everybody 1-2-Switch. It was worse in just about every single way. And Everybody 1-2-Switch should help you understand exactly what I mean by disappointment, because Everybody 1-2-Switch is not a disappointment. You see, the reason I'm not calling whatever that is a disappointment is because the original 1-2-Switch was so bad that when they announced the sequel, nobody could have possibly had any high expectations for it, meaning that when it came out, it would have been impossible for the game to disappoint anyone. Make sense? And with that in mind, let's move on to another disappointing party game, Super Mario Party. For all 2 of you out there who have never played Mario Party in any form, it's basically a virtual board game where you play as your favorite Mario characters. And back in the GameCube and Nintendo 64 days, this game was the shit. And a new one came out almost every single year. Each new entry built upon its predecessors in simple ways, never really reinventing the wheel because if it ain't broke, why fix it? But then during the Wii and Wii U era, Nintendo decided to innovate, and they created 2 of the worst Mario Party games in the series, Mario Parties 9 and 10. People thought the series was done for, that Mario Party was a thing of the past, until Super Mario Party, the brand new 2018 Nintendo Switch entry in the series that promised to go back to the series' roots. No more stupid new gimmicks, just old-fashioned Mario Party fun. So how could this game possibly be a disappointment? Well, the short answer is a lack of content. Don't get me wrong, I've had a lot of fun with Super Mario Party over the years. I genuinely think it has some of the best minigames in the series, and the large roster of playable characters where everybody has their own unique dice block made for a fresh spin on the traditional Mario Party formula. But when you compare it back to the golden age of Mario Party, you really start to feel the lack of content. With only 4 total boards to play on and a fairly uninteresting lineup of side content, it did not take a long time for this game to run its course. Back in the GameCube and Nintendo 64 era, the lack of content was never really a problem for Mario Party. Tired of playing Mario Party 2? No problem, because Mario Party 3 came out less than a year later. But when Super Mario Party got boring, and believe me, it did, there really was no sequel on the horizon to look forward to, so we continued to play these 4 boards into the ground until we just couldn't do it anymore. It would have been a prime candidate for DLC. A few new boards and minigames would have breathed new life into the game, but of course, that never happened. And the high expectations that people had for this game after finding out that it was returning to Mario Party's series roots were kind of dashed by the fact that there just wasn't that much to do in the game. So of course, it's fair to say that Super Mario Party, at least to some degree, was a disappointment. Super Mario Party Jamboree, of course, fixes some of these issues, but There was an entire 6 years between Super Mario Party and Super Mario Party Jamboree. The next disappointing game I want to talk about is Sports Story, and not only is this game disappointing, but it is actually straight up a bad game. For context, Golf Story is an indie game made exclusively for the Nintendo Switch. It has surprisingly smooth golf mechanics and a charming RPG-style story. It became really popular, so when news came out about Sports Story, made by the same developer as a sequel to Golf Story, people were really excited. I think you know where this is going. Upon its release, it was an immediate disappointment. The game is just a buggy mess. It should be cool that this game is like Golf Story, but with more sports, but the gameplay for every single sport is half-baked. Within the first 15 minutes of the game, you play a glitchy game of volleyball for the first time, where there's no instruction beforehand on how to play, and there's no scoreboard to even keep track of your progress. I had no idea what was going on, and it just felt glaringly incomplete. The tennis is borderline unplayable. There's no way to control where on the court you're hitting the ball, which makes certain in-game challenges almost impossible. Not only are the tennis mechanics bad, but the rules of the game are barely even coded properly. Look, I've played tennis before, and I'm pretty sure when you hit the ball out of bounds, it's supposed to be the other person's point. And even the golf mechanics that made the first game so good have been watered down here. All they had to do was copy and paste the mechanics from the first game, and they couldn't do it. On top of that, the story just doesn't make any sense. It contains pointless fetch quests that feel like entirely irrelevant padding. The transitions during cutscenes are really messy, and they just make the game feel even cheaper than it already is. Simply put, Sports Story is an incomplete sequel that was rushed out just to cash in on the success of Golf Story. I could probably sit here and list a million reasons why it's just a bad game, but that's not worth my time, and it's not worth yours either. So for the time being, let's just move on to another disappointing sports game, Nintendo Switch Sports. The actual revival of the Wii Sports series was also disappointing in its own right. Don't get me wrong, the sports in this game are nicely done, for the most part. Badminton kind of sucks. And the sports are probably objectively nicer to play than they were back in the Wii days, but it's the overall presentation of the game that doesn't quite reach the levels of endearing charm that the first game hit. Nintendo placed a lot of emphasis on online play for this game, all while sort of ignoring the development of any meaningful single-player experience. And this is disappointing, because back on Wii Sports, progressing all the way up the rankings only to get absolutely cooked by Matt in every single sport was one of the formative experiences of my childhood, and Switch Sports offers nothing like that. Additionally, almost everybody you knew had Wii Sports back in the day, and it's probably still rotting away on their shelf somewhere because it came packaged in with the Wii, and because the Wii sold so many units, this helped Wii Sports transcend the normal video game boundaries and solidify its place in pop culture.
So you can see right here, I'm getting ready to serve. All I do is throw that ball up in the air, and when oh, jeez. And there goes the tennis racket.
Now that is a skill issue. But you see, when Switch Sports came out, people weren't breaking TVs on the QVC network because Switch Sports came out 6 years after the release of the Nintendo Switch, and it was never bundled in with the console. Obviously, that's a lot less marketable. It's also the kind of game that was just begging for post-release content to support and bolster its existing lineup, and Nintendo kind of delivered on that. Golf came out as a free update several months after the release, and that was a disappointment in its own right. They just recycled the same golf courses from Wii Sports and Wii Sports Resort with mechanics that are nothing to write home about. You're better off playing Mario Golf Super Rush, to be completely honest. And then that was it. For a while at least, until about 2 years later when Nintendo randomly decided to say, hey, we're giving you basketball. And as cool as that kind of is, it's the first time we've seen basketball in a Nintendo game since, what, Mario Hoops 3-on-3? It's something that should have made it into the game 2 years ago when it came out. Another weird tidbit about the game is that they sold it packaged with this leg strap, which was supposed to be used to play the soccer minigame. And I think, you know, packaging a game with the leg strap for one of the sports makes you think, that sport is probably going to be the most exciting sport in the game. But let me tell you, I think soccer is the sport that I have spent the least amount of time on since I bought Switch Sports. It's not bad by any means, but it's not nearly as fun as you would think the sport that got a dedicated accessory should be. I'd like to see them use this strap for something else. On the topic of soccer, our next disappointing game is Mario Strikers Battle League. I swear this is the last sports game on the list. Mario Strikers on the GameCube and Mario Strikers on the Wii were a heck of a good time. So many characters to choose from, so many stadiums to play in, and full story modes that allowed solo players to experience the games in their own way. There were 15 years between Mario Strikers Charged on the Wii and Mario Strikers Battle League on the Switch. With a 15-year gap, fans were absolutely ravenous when they heard of the series revival. Little did they know that they'd be receiving one of the most incomplete Nintendo games ever released. Upon release, this was one of the smallest rosters you could choose from out of any Mario game ever. There were barely any stadiums to play in, and the ones that were there didn't change the gameplay experience in any meaningful way. On top of that, there's no fun side content or story mode. All you can do as a solo player is either play tournaments against CPUs or play online against strangers who are concerningly good at the game. Even if they're not your cup of tea, Mario sports games need side content to pad out the experience, even if it's just a really cheesy story mode or some sort of penalty kick shootout game. A lot of people like to group Mario Golf and Mario Tennis in with Mario Strikers Battle League, and honestly, I completely disagree with that notion. These games are absolute gems compared to Mario Strikers Battle League, and while I understand that there are fair critiques to be made of them, I still play Mario Golf and Mario Tennis to this day with my friends, all while Mario Strikers continues to collect dust on my shelf. You know what else would be a pretty big disappointment? If you made it this far into the video and you didn't subscribe. Also, the executive producers said they'll fire me if I don't get 10,000 subscribers by next Thursday. It's not going well, please help me. Another series revival gone wrong was Endless Ocean Luminous, which brought back a beloved underwater exploration series from the Nintendo Wii. In the original Endless Ocean for the Wii, we had to travel around to different ocean biomes to discover new types of marine life, all while unraveling the story naturally through our discoveries along the way. The game had such a relaxing vibe, and you could just spend hours getting lost in its oceans, and you could also spend time petting the fish, and that was honestly pretty cool. I think a lot of fans, including myself, were totally convinced that Endless Ocean was just stuck on the Wii days, buried in the Nintendo graveyard of obscure franchises. But when they announced the sequel, oh my goodness, the hype levels were through the roof. People were lining the streets outside Nintendo New York. The eShop totally crashed because of pre-orders flooding in, and Nintendo surpassed Microsoft as one of the largest companies in the world. Okay, maybe not, but Endless Ocean fans were definitely really excited, and unfortunately for them, this game also didn't quite live up to their expectations. For starters, the element of exploration and discovery is a bit lacking in this game compared to what we had back in the Wii. We don't get to travel around to different biomes like we used to be able to do. There's no Arctic Ocean, no tropical ocean, no deep sea. It's all just generic, normal ocean. Sure, there are some things to discover that are cool, like prehistoric dinosaur fish, but that's about it. All of these maps are just soulless, randomly generated seascapes. The excitement of progressing through the game to reach new areas is completely eliminated by this randomly generated map mechanic. On top of that, even though the story is not central to the Endless Ocean experience, unraveling it was part of what made the original game so charming. Here, the story is as shallow as they come, and out of the 20 to 30 hours it could take to actually beat this game, maybe 1 hour of that is spent on actual story content. The story is supposed to be about saving the environment because the coral reef is dying and we have to go around and salvage these light sources to try and save it. And this is genuinely a good message that I think more people need to care about, but that nice sentiment barely comes across when you spend the majority of the story listening to a guy named Daniel choke on his f***ing breathing tube. And to make matters worse, the conclusion of the story is actually locked behind the completion of the mystery board. The mystery board contains 99 tasks you must complete on your solo dives in the randomly generated maps. These tasks mostly do not come with instructions, and when they do, they're incredibly vague. At any given time, the only thing you really know is how many tasks you still have left, but not how to complete them. The biggest problem with this progression mechanic is that when you pair it with the randomly generated oceans for solo dives, there's never a guarantee that you're actually going to get the right map spawns to complete the tasks you have left on the mystery board. And what that means is that you could spend upwards of 50 hours just aimlessly swimming through these boring oceans with no guarantee that you'll ever see the end of the story. It's not like I'm dying to complete the story by any means, but if I'm gonna play this game, I would at least like to be able to reasonably see it through. Implementing a story mode with no end in sight is frankly poor game design. And so the combination of the failure to live up to the charm of the Wii games, combined with the unrealistic story mode expectations, kind of makes this into one of the deeper disappointments on the Nintendo Switch library. Oh, and did I mention that you can't pet the fish anymore? Yeah, I know. On the topic of finding wild animals, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet was also pretty disappointing. I want to give Pokemon some credit here because I actually did have a lot of fun with this game, and there are a lot of positive things to be said about it, like its innovations on the traditional Pokemon story formula, its likable cast of characters, and its open world mechanics that made exploration as fun as it's ever been in the Pokemon franchise. Its technical performance issues, however, were enough to kind of classify this one as one of the more disappointing Switch games in my view. As much as an open world fits right into the Pokemon formula, this one was just so choppy. There is absolutely no excuse for a first-party Nintendo game to run like this, when other heavy hitters like Monster Hunter, Xenoblade, and even Pokemon Legends Arceus run perfectly fine. Obviously, the Switch isn't gonna reach the heights of PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X with its performance, and I think most gamers are willing to forgive it to a certain extent, but I don't even think this one crosses that forgiveness threshold. I shouldn't have to worry about falling through the map or getting jump scared by Pokemon that are popping into my personal space. Not only did this game disappoint right upon its release, but it also left a lingering feeling of disappointment with each passing month where there wasn't an update or patch to fix the performance issues. And despite all of that, I do still believe that open worlds are the way forward for the Pokemon franchise, and I was fully willing to ignore the jankiness of this game to enjoy all of the positive things that it had to offer. But it was a little disappointing that they couldn't have done just a little bit better on their first full run through of a Pokemon open world. If you're interested on some of the more extended thoughts I gave on this game, check out my review from closer to when the game came out. The next disappointing game is Super Mario 3D All-Stars. Mario 64, Mario Sunshine, and Mario Galaxy were three of my favorite games growing up. I also like Mario Galaxy 2, but apparently Nintendo doesn't feel the same way. And having them all to play on the same cartridge, handheld wherever I go, would have absolutely melted the brain of my childhood self. But the quality of the games is not what makes this collection a disappointment. What makes this game a disappointment is Nintendo's odd choices with its packaging and release schedule. When this game came out, it was only on sale for 6 months before it got completely ripped from the shelves. The choice to make this a limited release is as puzzling as it is disappointing, because nowadays, scalpers are having a field day profiting off physical releases of the game. As far as the game itself, there's almost nothing new about this collection outside the music player. There could have been a little bit more care put into the presentation. We didn't need to do anything crazy, it just could have been added concept art, maybe a more stylized menu that evoked more of a nostalgic vibe. Think somewhere along the lines of Sonic Mega Collection's menu. I'll literally pop this game in just to experience the main menu. Point is, 3D All-Stars needed a better interface with more interesting stuff to look at. That's really it. Another reason this game was perceived as a bit of a disappointment was because people didn't just want HD ports of these games, people wanted fully developed remasters. Bringing the legacy versions of Sunshine and Galaxy to the modern era is still a net positive, but it shouldn't be that hard or exclusive just to make those games available with how often they add new games to the Nintendo Switch online libraries. And on that same note, Super Mario 64 is widely available on just about every Nintendo console that's come out since the Nintendo 64. There was a DS remake, you could play it on the Wii and Wii U eShops, and now there's even 2 ways to play it on the Switch because you can also access it through Switch Online. There's no reason why these ports couldn't have been released separately, while the Mario 35th anniversary celebration got the remasters that the occasion deserved. And even though I complain about this right now, I'm probably gonna play these games tonight because I do spend a lot of time on that game. And moving on from the old and into something a little newer, another disappointing game is ARMS. Rather than reviving a beloved franchise with astronomical expectations attached to it like a lot of the other games on this list are, ARMS represents something new for the Nintendo library. It was a boxing game that seemed like a modern take on the classic Punch-Out series, and it could piggyback off the 2017 Switch hype train, so everything looked like it was gonna work out. Too bad it didn't. This game is disappointing not because it's bad, but because it's good, and we wanted this franchise to take off and it didn't. But sadly, like many of the other games that have proven to be disappointments, ARMS also suffers from the lack of content problem. If you don't have friends to play multiplayer with, then your only real option is to play online. There's no real meaningful solo experience or story mode in this game, which is actually insane because a story mode where you're trying to become like the ARMS boxing champion actually would have been really awesome. And we know Nintendo really wanted this game to stick because they did try to organize some professional ARMS tournaments.
Next punch could be victorious. Oh, Mr. Yabuki punches through the throat. Mr. Yabuki. Oh my goodness.
What I think is funny is that there is somebody out there who is the ARMS international champion, and I don't think anybody gives a shit. Ultimately, this game fits the definition of a disappointment because it showed plenty of promise when it first came out, and I think people were generally hopeful that the series would go on to do well, but unfortunately, as the Switch's life cycle evolved and moved on from its launch titles, ARMS faded into obscurity. It's worth noting that an ARMS character did make a playable appearance in Super Smash Bros., but looking back on it now, that appearance really does feel more like a failed last-ditch effort to get the new IP to catch on. At the end of the day, these ARMS just didn't stretch as far as they could have. Oh man. You know what else is disappointing? Third-party Switch ports. In the first couple years of owning my Switch, I would buy these third-party Switch ports pretty often because they were always on sale. Boy, did I stop doing that real quick. I mean, it's not like I was expecting these to run as well as they do on other consoles, but damn, they are just ugly most of the time. Look me in the eyes and tell me how that is acceptable. Mortal Kombat on the Switch is one of the greatest crimes against humanity, but I'm not looking to rip a fatality against the whole third-party Switch lineup, because I do think they serve a noble purpose. These games allow gamers who might not be able to afford more than one console to play some of those popular third-party titles that are often gatekept on the more powerful consoles like PlayStation and Xbox. Sure, playing GTA on Switch might feel like trying to run a marathon in clown shoes, but if it means more people get to enjoy these awesome games, then I'd say they're worth releasing. And I'd say the same is true for just about every game I talked about on this list. Just because a game fails to meet every single expectation we have for it doesn't mean it shouldn't exist. There are hours of fun to be had with every single game I talked about in this video. Even the most disappointing games out there are somebody's favorite games. And that's the beautiful thing about gaming. We all enjoy them in our own way. But on that note, I'm going to leave you with one more definition, and that is the definition of sympathy, which is defined as feelings of pity and sorrow for someone else's misfortune. Because if you know someone whose favorite game of all time was talked about in this video, show them some sympathy. You should probably feel sorry for them.